Before we ever said stay on code, Neely Fuller gave us the entire code book. We just weren't disciplined enough to follow it. Let me tell you about a man who decoded white supremacy 50 years before most of us even understood we needed a decoder. Neely Fuller Jr. is the godfather of everything we now call staying on code, moving in silence, operating strategically, and understanding the system we're up against. This man wrote the manual that shaped the entire grassroots movement we see today, yet most people don't even know his name. And that's a problem, because if you're serious about Black liberation, if you're serious about changing Black America, if you're serious about dismantling white supremacy, Neely Fuller's work is not optional reading. It's required, it's foundational, it's the blueprint that everything else should be built on. Neely Fuller Jr. wrote The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a textbook, workbook for thought, speech, and/or action for victims of racism, white supremacy, back in 1969. Let me repeat that date. 1969. This man was breaking down the mechanics of white supremacy, providing a comprehensive framework for understanding and countering it, creating a systematic approach to liberation decades before most of the conversations we're having now even started. While others were focused on integration, on acceptance, on proving our humanity to people who had no intention of recognizing it, Neely Fuller was saying, stop begging, start understanding, start strategizing, start operating with precision and discipline. The brilliance of Fuller's work is that he didn't just complain about racism. He didn't just describe the problem. He provided a system for countering it. He broke down white supremacy into its component parts, explained how it operates in every area of life, and most importantly, gave specific guidance on how victims of racism should think, speak, and act to counter that system. He understood something that many people still don't get. You can't dismantle what you don't understand, and you can't fight effectively without a systematic approach. Fuller's central premise is straightforward but revolutionary. Racism is not just prejudice or individual bigotry. It's a system. White supremacy is the only functional form of racism because it's the only form backed by power, by institutions, by resources, by structure. And if racism is a system, then countering it requires a counter system. You can't fight organization with chaos. You can't fight strategy with emotion. You can't fight discipline with inconsistency. You need a code. You need a unified approach. You need everyone operating according to the same principles, moving in the same direction with the same ultimate goal. This is where the concept of staying on code comes from, even if people don't realize they're channeling Neely Fuller when they say it. Staying on code means operating according to a set of principles designed to counter white supremacy in every interaction, every decision, every aspect of life. It means thinking strategically instead of emotionally. It means prioritizing Black collective interests over individual gain. It means understanding that everything we do either reinforces or challenges the system of white supremacy. There's no neutral ground. Fuller laid out specific areas where racism operates: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. He explained how white supremacy manifests in each area and how victims of racism should navigate each area to minimize harm and maximize counter strategy. This comprehensive approach is what separates his work from generic anti-racism. He's not asking white people to be nicer. He's not appealing to morality or conscience. He's providing a survival manual for navigating a hostile system and a strategy guide for eventually replacing that system with justice. Now, Fuller's work was deeply connected to and influenced by Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, another giant whose contributions to our understanding of white supremacy cannot be overstated. Dr. Welsing developed the Cress theory of color confrontation, which provided a psychological framework for understanding white supremacy as a response to white genetic annihilation anxiety. Her work on the deep psychological drivers of racism complemented Fuller's systematic approach to countering it. Together, their work created a comprehensive understanding of both why white supremacy exists and how to fight it. What makes both Fuller and Welsing's work so powerful powerful is that they centered the experience and agency of Black people. They weren't trying to convince white people to change. They were educating Black people on how to survive and resist. They understood that waiting for oppressors to voluntarily give up power is foolish. They understood that appealing to the humanity or morality of people who benefit from your oppression is a waste of time. They understood that liberation requires us to change our thinking, our behavior, our organization, not to wait for them to change theirs. Fuller's counter-racism code is built on several key principles that are just as relevant today as they were in 1969, maybe more so. First, victims of racism must stop participating in their own oppression. That means examining every behavior, every purchase, every relationship, every decision through the lens of whether it reinforces or challenges white supremacy. It means being willing to sacrifice comfort and convenience for strategic positioning. It means choosing collective benefit over individual advancement when those two things conflict. Second, victims of racism must speak and act with precision. Fuller emphasized the importance of defining terms, of being exact in language, of not allowing white supremacy to hide behind vague euphemisms and coded language. This is why he insisted on calling racism what it is, white supremacy, not prejudice, not bias, not discrimination, white supremacy, because precision in language is precision in thinking, and precision in thinking is necessary for precision in action. Third, victims of racism must focus on justice as the ultimate goal and the measure of all action. Fuller defined justice simply balance between people, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person who needs help the most gets the most help. Every action, every policy, every system should be evaluated against that standard. Does it produce justice? If not, it needs to be opposed and replaced. Fourth, victims of racism must develop and maintain a code of conduct that everyone follows consistently. This is the staying on code principle. It's not enough for some Black people to operate strategically while others undermine that strategy. It's not enough for some of us to prioritize collective interests while others sell out for individual gain. The code only works if we all follow it. White supremacy maintains power through unified action, through everyone playing their position in service of the same goal. We need the same discipline, the same unity of purpose, the same willingness to subordinate individual desires to collective necessity. This is where Fuller's work shames a lot of the current grassroots movement, and I mean that as constructive criticism because we need to be honest about our shortcomings. Fuller gave us the entire framework. He did the intellectual work. He laid out the strategy. He provided the code. And what have we done with it? We've cherry-picked the parts we like. We've ignored the discipline it requires. We've failed to implement it systematically. We've used the language while abandoning the substance. We talk about staying on code, but then we don't actually stay on code. We talk about Black unity, but then we tear each other down over minor disagreements. We talk about economic empowerment, but then we don't support Black businesses consistently. We talk about political independence, but then we keep giving our votes away without demanding specific deliverables. We talk about discipline and organization, but then we operate chaotically, emotionally, reactively. We have the blueprint, but we're not following it. Fuller's work requires discipline that many of us aren't willing to embrace. It requires sacrificing immediate gratification for long-term strategy. It requires subordinating ego to collective good. It requires doing the unglamorous work of study, of practice, of consistent application of principles, even when it's inconvenient. It requires being willing to be corrected when you're out of code. It requires holding others accountable when they're out of code. It requires building institutions, not just making viral posts. It requires sustained effort over decades, not just protest energy that fades after a few weeks. The grassroots movement today has energy, has passion, has more access to information and communication tools than any previous generation, but it often lacks the systematic approach that Fuller advocated. We're great at identifying problems, but inconsistent at implementing solutions. We're great at calling out injustice, but less great at building the alternative systems that would replace injustice with justice. We're great at consciousness raising, but less great at the disciplined organization that consciousness should produce. produce. This is why Fuller's book, The United Independent Compensatory Code Act System Concept, is required reading for any Black American who wants to change Black America. Not suggested reading, not optional reading, required. Because without understanding the systematic nature of white supremacy, you'll waste energy fighting symptoms instead of causes. Without understanding the comprehensive scope of how racism operates, you'll miss how your actions in one area undermine your goals in another area. Without understanding the need for a unified code, you'll contribute to the chaos that allows white supremacy to maintain control through our disorganization. Reading Fuller forces you to think differently. It forces you to examine your own complicity. It forces you to recognize that good intentions without strategic action is just feel-good performance. It forces you to understand that individual success within a white supremacist system is not the same as collective liberation from that system. It forces you to get serious, get disciplined, get organized, or get out of the way. The beauty of Fuller's approach is that it's practical. It's not abstract theory. It's applicable guidance for daily life. How should you spend money? In ways that build Black economic power. How should you choose where to live? In ways that strengthen Black communities. How should you vote? In ways that advance Black interests specifically. How should you raise children? Teaching them the realities of white supremacy and how to navigate it. How should you conduct relationships? In ways that don't reinforce racial hierarchies. Every area of life gets examined and strategized. And this is why our survival depends on it. White supremacy is not going away on its own. It's not going to voluntarily dismantle itself. It's not going to be shamed or persuaded into relinquishing power. It has to be countered with superior strategy, organization, discipline, and unity. And we can't develop that counter strategy if we don't understand the system we're countering, if we don't follow a unified code, if we don't commit to the sustained effort required. Neely Fuller understood that fighting white supremacy is not a part-time hobby or a trending topic. It's the work of our lives. It's the context for every decision. It's the lens through which everything must be viewed. And if we're not willing to approach it with that level of seriousness, with that level of commitment, with that level of discipline, we're just playing games while the system continues grinding us down. So here's what needs to happen. Every Black person reading this needs to get Fuller's book. Read it, study it, discuss it with others, implement its principles in your life. Hold yourself accountable to the code. Hold others accountable to the code. Build with people who are on code. Distance yourself from people who refuse to get on code. Make staying on code the baseline expectation for how we move, not an aspirational goal. We need to stop reinventing wheels that Fuller already designed. We need to stop having surface-level conversations about issues he already provided deep analysis of. We need to stop pretending we're going to figure this out on our own when the manual already exists. The work has been done. The framework has been created. The code has been written. Our job is to study it, internalize it, and live it. Fuller is in his 90s now, still sharp, still teaching, still providing guidance to those willing to listen. Like Minister Farrakhan, he's given us everything we need. He's laid the foundation. He's created the framework. He's proven that systematic counter-racism is possible if we're disciplined enough to implement it. Now it's on us to honor his work by actually using it, by building on it, by teaching it to the next generation, by making it the operating system for how Black America moves. The Godfather of staying on code gave us the code. He showed us how to stay on it. He explained why staying on it is non-negotiable for our survival. We don't need new theories. We don't need more analysis. We need implementation. We need discipline. We need unity around the principles Fuller laid out 50 years ago. We need to prove that we're serious about liberation by being serious about the work liberation requires. That starts with studying Neely Fuller. That continues with living what he taught. That succeeds when we all finally get on code and stay there. Our survival depends on it. So what are we waiting for?